اللي هو الأكسجين toxicity. Oxygen toxicity means that we have higher concentration of or higher oxidative stress in the body rather than talking about the oxygen as a molecule itself. كلنا بنعرف ان الاكسجين اصلا عباره عن جزيء مفيد جدا. فبدل ما او rather than talking about or describing oxygen itself as a function, they focus in this topic or this in this lecture on the oxidative stress and link that with the oxygen concentration if we have increased in the oxygen concentration. So that's why they are connecting toxicity with the oxygen itself if we have higher concentration of oxygen or high oxidative stress. Before discussing the oxidative stress itself, let's go through the history in order to just explore when they started to discuss these issues that are related to the health of human. So the term itself as an oxidative stress began like 40, 50 years ago in the 17th of the last century. And they mentioned the first time for the toxic effect of oxygen molecule in the mid of the last century في منتصف القرن الماضي انه the oxygen can be toxic under certain circumstances. هلا راح نحكي عنها اليوم. As well as after that we have a publication mentioning the relationship between the oxygen or the oxidative stress and aging as well. بعد شوي راح نشوف as a mechanism كيف انه الاكسجين او الاوكسيديتيف ستريس ممكن يعمل aging to the cells. And later on they discovered the molecules that could be formed during the oxidative stress, like superoxide molecule and the function of the superoxide dismutase enzyme and its activity and the importance of this enzyme and many other enzymes in the reduction of the oxidative stress itself. So during the mid and after of the last century there were a lot of talk about the oxidative stress. لما بنحكي عن oxidative stress دائما بنلاحظ انه في عندنا كلمه مرتبطه فيها اللي هو reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species عباره عن molecules that are generated by the oxidation reaction, and that's why they are called oxidative molecules and they are connected with the oxidative stress. Reactive oxygen species means that you have all species that are formed from the oxygen itself. That's why the title is described as an oxygen toxicity rather than oxidative stress. What are these molecules? Some of them, like this one, is called superoxide anion. It means that you have a radical electron in the oxygen molecule itself. It's O2, but you have extra electron that will give a charge to this molecule. And this radical or this superoxide molecule is very active. That's why it's called radical, by the way. Another molecule عبارة عن something like two oxygen molecules as well as one hydrogen in order to stabilize the charge in the superoxide molecule that will be formed. As at the same time, it will still be a radical. Radical means that this electron is still active. It can be donated to another molecule. And in this case, it will be called hydroperoxyl radical molecule. The hydroxyl radical itself, it's the OH with extra electron here, and it's mentioned as a dot in order to know it's a radical molecule. فكل molecule عليه radical, it means, عليه dot means it's a radical molecule. It means that the electron is not stable. It will jump to another atom or another molecule. Another oxygen or reactive oxygen species is hydrogen peroxide. The difference between this molecule or this one or the third one and the first groups, هذول كلهم عبارة عن free radicals which are different from the reactive oxygen species اللي هم مش free radicals. بمعنى آخر, all of them will be classified as reactive oxygen species, but some of them are distinctively described as free radical molecules. الهيدروجين بيروكسيد كلنا بنعرفه اللي هو ال H2O2, معروف عند البنات باسم الأكسجين لأنه بيستخدموه في تبييض الشعر. يمكن حكينا عن هذا الموضوع لأنه بيعمل بليتشنج. السبب في ذلك أنه عبارة عن reactive oxygen species. It's very active molecule. The oxygen itself is oxygen, still the normal molecule that we know, and the hydroxyl is another form of the reactive oxygen species. So basically, the term of oxidative stress and free radical damage are not synonymous. Oxidative stress is different from free radicals or the radicals themselves, because we have reactive oxygen species and we have free radical molecules. How we know them؟ هلا هذول كلهم عباره عن free radicals ما عدا الملونين باللون الاصفر. They are described as reactive oxygen species only. بس كلهم عباره عن reactive oxygen species. So nitric oxide is another thing you might be not familiar with, اللي هو واحد من الفري راديكالز اللي بتتكون نتيجه النيتريك اوكسايد toxicity or production during the process of certain signals. عباره عن signaling molecule, so that's why sometimes it will be at higher concentration will be toxic. Peroxynitrate is another free radical that will be formed from the nitric oxide molecule itself. So these dots are very dangerous, let me say, electrons in the molecules that will cause damage to the next molecules. How they are generated in the body, this is the normal physiological condition that will produce, for example, the oxygen radical in this situation. And it came from the normal oxygen by that enzyme that is known as an ADPH, dependent oxidase enzyme. And in order to have this reaction, we need reducing agent in order to give the electrons to the oxygen in order to be produced as a free radical. Why the body is normally, لأنه قلت أنا عبارة عن normal physiological condition. Why the body is normally producing such kind of radical? One of the functions is to kill the bacteria as antibacterial agent. فواحد من الأشياء اللي بيستفيد منها الجسم بإنتاج هذول الراديكالز اللي هو قتل البكتيريا. هلا إذا كان في عندنا oxidative stress أعلى أو free radical production أعلى, there will be toxicity of such kind of molecule. هذا المولكيول مش هو السبب في السمية. الإلكترون الموجود عنده it will jump to another atom or another molecule like DNA, protein and lipids, and it will destroy the cell. So that's why the body has to have defense mechanism against the oxygen radical. So that's why we have superoxide dismutase enzyme. راح يحوله إلى مركب آخر ليس أقل سمية أو ليس بمعنى آخر safe. هو أقل سمية من free radical, but still it's not safe, اللي هو الهيدروجين peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide inside the body or inside the cell can be also converted to another toxic molecule اللي هو عبارة عن hypochlorite in order to kill the bacteria. So or the hydrogen peroxide can be safely converted to H2O and O اللي هو الأكسجين اللي هو الO2 by catalase enzyme. So we have another defense mechanism in order to deplete الهيدروجين peroxide. خلاصة هذا السلايد to know إنه في عندنا production طبيعي أو إنتاج طبيعي للفري radicals أو الرياكتيف oxygen species, and they are used as part of the immune system in order to kill the bacteria. However, the body has also a defense mechanism in order to deplete these molecules. Another sequential process اللي هو oxygen conversion to oxygen peroxide molecule and the H2O2. This is the sequential process of gaining electrons, and sometimes we will be lucky if it will be converted to water. In the middle, these molecules are going to be toxic. The toxicity came from the extreme reactivity of these species. عندهم تفاعلية عالية. Short lifespan is another challenge لأنه ما نقدرش نقيسهم بهاي الحالة. And they generate a new ROS species by chain reaction. It means that this is not the only reaction that they are involved in. They can also react with many other molecules زي ما حكينا زي DNA والlipids والproteins. That's why they are damaging various tissues because of the high reactivity of these species and ability to generate ROS species or different types of ROS species. هلا generally speaking, تقريبا من 1 ل 400 الاكسجين taken by the body is converted to free radicals, which is a huge amount by the body. This is because we have normal reactions that are responsible for the production of free radicals. One of them is the normal mitochondrial function اللي هو production of energy. During the electron transport chain by the mitochondrial membrane complexes اللي هو البروسيس الضرورية عشان نعمل pumping للبروتون وبعدين إنتاج ال ATP. الخلاصة بديش أخذ في التفاصيل هاي. During this process of electron transport chain there will be a leak of electrons. مصدر الإلكترونات اللي بيروح على الأكسجين وبيعمل free radicals came from many sources. One of them is the electron transport chain in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And I think you could remember this. اللي في عندنا ال NADH for example لما بيجي على الكومبلكس نمبر 1 بالالكترون ترانسبورت تشين بعطيه البروتون او الالكترون ببلش يعمل ترانسفير. Sometimes we have leak of these electrons that will cause the production of ROS species. Another reaction that is different from the first one اللي هو xanthine oxidase and aldehyde oxidase enzyme. They form normally superoxide anions or anion radicals and hydrogen peroxide. These enzymes are very common enzymes or very well-known common enzymes that are involved in the production of superoxide and hydrogen peroxide complexes. ال NADPH oxidase يمكن شفناه هون قبل شوي. واحد من الانزيمز اللي بتنتج فري راديكالز and nitric oxide synthase اللي هو الانزيم اللي بينتج نيتريك اوكسايد بعدين نيتريك اوكسايد بيتحول الى نيتريك اوكسايد راديكال. Okay. Another source, lipoxygenase in platelets, for example, and the leukocytes, which is part of the immune system and sometimes signal pathway. Radiations, اللي هو external physical, let me say, source of the free radical generation. That's why radiation بتسبب cancer or associated with many diseases because they are generating the free radicals. Light of appropriate lambda can produce some light or singlet of oxygen. Singlet والفree radicals بالchemistry means إنه الإلكترون الفree radical has certain kind of rotation around the atom while السinglet العكس تماما. فبالتالي بيسموا واحد radical وواحد بيسموه singlet oxygen. هذا الفرق بينهم. Cigarette smoke and air pollution can be a source of the reactive oxygen species. And hypoxic condition as well can produce or can be cause of production of reactive oxygen species. We have a lot of sources or risk factors that will produce these dangerous reactive oxygen species or free radicals. The risk of these factors, or they are highly dangerous because they destroy our organic molecules or our macromolecules. Mainly, the concern is about the DNA molecule itself. If you have, for example, certain kind of free radical effect or reactive oxygen effect on the DNA, it means that you have mutation eventually. And we discussed some few examples in genetics about that. How the body is going to defend or actually protect the body itself from the reactive oxygen species. These are the most common reactions that we have. Some of them, by default, when they are trying to protect the body, they will produce also another kind of reactive oxygen species. Like the first reaction اللي هو superoxide dismutase لأنه هو بيتخلص من الفري راديكالز راح يولد لي reactive oxygen آخر اللي هو ال H2O2 molecule. الكاتاليز هو الحل إنه أتخلص من ال H2O2. So we have these sequential reactions in order to reduce the toxicity of reactive oxygen species. The glutathione reductase is also responsible for the reduction of the toxicity of reactive oxygen species because it takes electrons from the already reduced atoms or reduced molecules. It has many functions and it's one of the most important antioxidant mechanism in our body. And mainly they are working in all of cells, but mainly they are important for the red blood cells. So the deficiency of this enzyme is causing another problem. راح نناقشه هذا لوحده بعد شوي. Mieloperoxidase is another enzyme that is reacting the H2O2 with any other molecule that will generate another kind of reactive oxygen species. We have two kinds of reactions مسؤولين عن تكوين الفري radicals أو use of free radicals زي ما حكينا. They are trying to consume the oxygen radical as well as the hydrogen peroxide, like the Haber-West reaction, and we have Finton reaction. These reactions are responsible for the production of hydroxyl radicals. And just to make it simple for you, this is the two reactions that I discussed before. The Finton reaction is kind of reaction that use iron in order to produce hydroxyl radical, and Haber-West reaction is another kind of reaction also using iron, but it has another kind of combination of components. So eventually they are producing hydrogen peroxide, hydroxyl radical that will cause damage to the nerve cells. زي ما حكينا قبل شوي انه الهاربرز والويست reactions are the or Fenton reactions are responsible for the production of hydroxyl radicals. Another kind of reaction that we discussed اللي هو ال NADPH oxidase اللي هو بعطيني الاكسجين radical by the use of an ADPH molecule, and this is the glutathione reaction that is converting the oxidized glutathione to the reduced one with the help of an ADPH. هذا عبارة عن إكمال للرياكشن الأول. الرياكشن الأول هو حول reduced one إلى oxidized one, and it will be completed to return the glutathione to the original form. راح نحكي عنه بعد شوية. The problem with the antioxidant or oxidant formation is in the body is the need and the harm. بمعنى آخر إنه the body needs to form these reactive oxygen species, but the problem will be in the harm effect of these species. So that's why we have to have a balance between the sources and the defense mechanisms that we have in the body. So we have either endogenous sources اللي هم normal processes that will produce reactive oxygen species, and we could have also external sources. Under these stress effects, we have to have defense mechanism in our body مرتبط بوجود بعض الانزيمز, for example, like الكتاليز, superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase enzyme. All of these enzymes are responsible for the antioxidant effect, as well as many other molecules like the vitamins and the polyphenols. البوليفينولز عباره عن مركبات بتيجي من مستخلصات نباتيه. That's why they are stressing on the use of plants as antioxidants. زي ما بتسمعوا يمكن بقول لك اشرب الشاي الاخضر او اشرب مش عارف ايش الفلاني. This is because they are rich with the polyphenols. So either as innate or internal or endogenous defense mechanism, we have to make a balance between the production and the consumption of these free radicals or reactive oxygen species to reach what's called homeostasis. Otherwise, we have two harmful effects of these molecules. اللي هو, for example, they could affect physiological functions, and sometimes they are associated with, let me say, aging as a common factor or common phenomenon that is associated with reactive oxygen species. And sometimes, if we don't have normal growth, it may be associated with cancer as unlucky person. So the reactive oxygen species is connected with many, many kinds of diseases, starting with the metabolic diseases until we reach aging and cancer. So the problem, again, you don't have a balance between the income and the outcome of the reactive oxygen species due to deficiency maybe of certain enzymes or antioxidant factors. This is just two papers have been selected in the last year to show the effect of the oxidative stress in multiple sclerosis, for example. They are connecting the multiple sclerosis with the oxidative stress. And we have here also another evidence. So the connection doesn't mean it's causative factor. It means that we have a risk factor of reactive oxygen species in the formation or development of multiple sclerosis. So again, the problem is in the balance between the antioxidants and the oxidants that are causing production of reactive oxygen species. So what has to do with the oxygen? هل هو good ولا bad? It's good for certain functions. واحدة منهم respiration. We need a lot of oxygen for our respiratory system, our cell respiration basically, because it's the last molecule that is accepting electrons in order to form water. هو المولكيول الوحيد اللي بياخذ الالكترون من الالكترون ترانسبورت تشين حتى يعمل له نوع من نيوتراليزيشن ويحوله الى ووتر. So it is required in the oxidative stress or oxidation reaction that we have in our body. However, if it is associated with high concentration or production of high reactive oxygen species, it will be a bad molecule. That's why we need to have a balance of the oxygen consumption. And sometimes they are saying انه اذا بتزود شخص على سبيل المثال بكميه اكبر من الاكسجين اثناء عمليه الريكفري, it could be a risk factor for the development of the reactive oxygen species. The point is, the reactive oxygen species, they react with molecules. هذول molecules could be lipids, DNA, or proteins, but the DNA is the most important molecule that we are worrying about. Okay, again, the same thing, formation of reactive oxygen species. This is the normal, for example, production of the ROS species that could affect our organs. هذا illustration للشيء اللي حكيناه قبل شوي، يمكن صرنا ذاكرينه اكثر من مره، اللي هو ال NADPH oxidase reaction that is forming the oxygen radical that will be responsible for the formation of in the future اللي هو الهايبوكلوريت in order to kill the infecting microorganism like the bacteria by the macrophage. So it's formed by the macrophage cells or the immune cells. هلا حكينا عن هذول انه اكثر من مره، انه في عندنا سوبر اوكسايد انيونز، هيدروكسيل راديكلز، هيدروجين بيروكسايد. These are cellular injury occurred through the production of these RO species, and we have antioxidant mechanism for these molecules. For example, superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, glutathione reductase, and catalase, and polyphenols. هذول كلهم اشرنا لهم بهذا الشارت اللي هم هون. اوكي، مره اخرى بس انا حبيت اذكرهم بالمسميات الفعليه بدون الاختصارات. اوكي، الاسم كامل. طيب هلا البوليفينولز من وين بنجيبهم؟ من البلانتس او plant sources, and we have a lot of plants that are rich with these polyphenols. Polyphenols means انه عندهم هذول الرينجز اللي شايفينهم, and they have these hydroxyl groups, for example. That's why they are called polyphenol compounds or molecules. طيب واحد من الرياكشنز اللي بنستخدمها في الديفنس against certain specific reaction. خليني ابلش بالبسيطه اللي هون. اذا تكون عندي على سبيل المثال ال H2O2 molecule، حكينا في واحد من السلايدز انه it can be converted to water and oxygen by catalase enzymes. This is the simplest reaction. And الكاتاليز يعني موجود في اورجانيزمز كثيره زي المايكرو اورجانيزمز. بعض البكتيريا تصنف انها كاتاليز بوزيتيف كاتاليز نيجاتيف اذا سمعتوا بالمايكرو اورجانيزم او الميكروبيولوجي. كيف بنكشف عن البكتيريا انها كاتاليز بوزيتيف كاتاليز نيجاتيف؟ ايش هو؟ بلازما نوب هذيك كوجيليز formation of air bubbles اللي بتكون نتيجه تكون الاكسجين from the so you have to have H2O2 solution in order to detect the if it's catalase positive or negative. هلا نيجي لواحد الرياكشنز الطبيعيه في الجسم how the body is using for example glutathione reductase and peroxidase in order to for example defend our protect ourselves from the H2O2. هلا normally if we have certain kind of sequential reactions that will produce free radicals and then reactive oxygen species like ال H2O2. هلا البادي بيحاول يحول زي الريد بلاد سيل سوري الوايت بلاد سيلز بيحاولوا يحولوهم ل H2O2 بمساعده السوبر اوكسايد dismutase. So as a defense mechanism, super oxide dismutase is indication على الديفنس if we have increase in the activity of this enzyme. ليش انا بحكي هذا الحكي؟ لانه بواحد من السلايدز اذا انتبهتوا حكينا انه مشكله الفري راديكالز او رياكتيف اوكسجين سبيشيز انه they are not easy or that they are not easily measured. ليش؟ short half life. وبالتالي لما بدي اشوف انا رياكتيف او اوكسيديتيف ستريس في هاي الخلايا او في هذا الجسم I'm not going to watch these particles themselves or these molecules. صعب جدا اقيسهم لانه they are very active, they are radical molecules. طب الحل الثاني اشوف الرياكشنز اللي involving سواء الفورميشن او الكونسومشن اوف ذيس فري راديكالز. بمعنى اخر اذا في عندي انزيمز لهم علاقه بانه بيخلصوني من الفري راديكالز او بيخلصوني من رياكتيف اوكسجين سبيشيز وزاد النشاط تبعهم it means that the body or the cell or the organ is under oxidative stress or reactive oxygen species formation. So what the scientists do actually, they are not measuring the oxidative stress per se as a molecule. They are measuring the activity of these enzymes. So if we see, for example, superoxide dismutase activity is high, and we can do that in the lab. في كتات خاصة للموضوع. It means that we have oxidative stress as well as somehow defense mechanism by the formation of H2O2. At the same time, H2O2 is still reactive oxygen species. So we have to measure also other enzymes like the peroxidase enzyme, as well as glutathione reductase enzyme activity and glutathione peroxidase enzyme activity. And these enzymes, oh, sorry, this is G6PD, not peroxidase. So the glutathione reductase enzyme is responsible for the reduction of the glutathione that is already used in the first step or the first reaction. هلا الجلوتاثيون عشان نستخدمه لازم يكون بهذا الشكل اللي هو reduced form حتى يحول ال H2O2 إلى H2O. هلا هذا بسبب مشكلة ثانية إنه الجلوتاثيون will be oxidized. ليش؟ لأنه خسر الهيدروجين اللي عنده. حتى يضل active ومتوفر دائما في الخلية we have to reduce it. That's why we have to have glutathione reductase enzyme حتى نوفر كميات من هذا الانزيم. عشان اوفر كميات او سوري كميات من هذا المولكيول عشان هيك انا بدي مصدر الهيدروجين والمصدر الهيدروجين راح يكون ال NADPH. So ال NADPH is another thing that I need in the cell in order to keep continuous production of active glutathione. من وين راح اجيبه؟ مش من الجلوكوز. هو الجلوكوز راح يكون مصدر غير مباشر. في عندنا انزيم اسمه جلوكوز 6 فوسفات ديهيدروجينيز بيحول الجلوكوز لجلوكوز 6 فوسفات and it will produce NADPH from NAD. فبالتالي هذا الرياكشن اذا بدنا نصححه نكتب كالاتي ترسم سهم لل NADPH من ال NADP لل NADPH بهذا الشكل، وهون بترسم تحول الجلوكوز الى جلوكوز 6 فوسفات. بس هم مختصرين هاي القصه لانه بيعتقدوا انه الشخص اللي بدرس هذا الموضوع او بقراه هو فاهم اوريدي انه الجلوكوز بتحول لجلوكوز 6 فوسفات and as a byproduct we have NADPH. فاللي بدك تعمله انت للتصحيح يعني مشان نكون دقيقين there is a production of NADPH from ال NADP and تحويل الجلوكوز الى جلوكوز 6 فوسفات تكمله الرياكشن. Another sequential reaction that the body does or the cell does for the production of free radicals and reactive oxygen species, and the safe product will be the water after giving the electron. In order to do that عشان احوله لwater I could follow one of these reactions زي اللي حكينا عنه قبل شوي. For example, if you form hydrogen peroxide by the catalase will be converted to H2O2 and water. The same reaction we described before. Glutathione peroxidase is another solution. However, the glutathione has to be produced again بهذا الشكل. لازم ارجعه الى الجلوتاثيون reduced form اللي هو باستخدام G6PD. Okay. Superoxide dismutase is another solution in order to deplete superoxide molecule. However, it will produce H2O2 molecule if it produces the oxygen itself. The glutathione is very important to remember the structure. This is the structure of the tripeptide consisting of glutamate, cysteine, glycine. It's the structure of the glutathione active molecule. إذا كان عندي على cysteine H means that it's reduced one. إذا راحت الهيدروجين من هون you have to form two molecules of glutathione together or true tripeptide. هلا مجازا احنا ما بنسميه tripeptide لأنه هذا مش peptide bond as usual. Okay. It's another kind of synthesis مش peptide form أو peptide bond formation by the synthesis of protein. It's tri-amino acid molecule because the linkage is between the linkage between glutamate and cysteine is toward the side chain of the glutamate itself. It's something different from the peptide bond. So that's why we don't describe it as a tripeptide. It's tri-amino acid structure. Okay. The point is to understand or to know the difference between reduced one and the oxidized one. هلا بهذا الشكل نكتب احنا GSSG اللي هو هذا الشكل. لما بنفكه بصير GSH اللي هو GSH and GSSG structures. بالماركت الآن في تسويق هائل جدا للأنتي أوكسيدانتس اللي بيشتغلوا بطريقة غير إنزيمية الجلوتاثيون، الفيتامين سي، فيتامين إي، فيتامين A as well as uric acids. They are very common in the market as antioxidant agents. That's why they are marketing a lot of products depending on the anti-oxidative activity of these molecules. هذا السلايد بشير انه في عندنا افكت للرياكتيف اوكسيجين سبيسيز على عده molecules. I think it's a duplicate slide. قديش ساعة صارت؟ لسه معنا وقت صح؟ طيب خلينا نخلص السلايد هذا اليوم مشان المرة الجاية نفضل الهيموغلوبين. طيب. The title is talking about the clinical significance of the oxygen reactive oxygen species. What is the impact of these reactive species on the development of certain diseases? One of them is the chronic inflammation like the rheumatoid arthritis. It's associated significantly with the reactive oxygen species. The inflammations, respiratory diseases, for example, all of these are connected with the ROS species. Diseases of the eye, like the retinopathy, prematurity or retinopathy of prematurity is also associated with high oxygen stress. That will be associated with reactive oxygen species. The cataract is also with such kind of condition اللي هو reactive oxygen species. فملخص هذول التو slides انه في عندنا مجموعه من diseases like perfusion, also injury. All of these diseases are associated with the high stress of oxygen or reactive oxygen species. They found also a connection between the atherosclerosis and the formation of, the ROS and the formation of the atherosclerosis, because they assume LDL, for example, as lipoprotein under the oxidative stress will form, by the effect of the oxidative stress, they will form what's called foam cells after the engulfment by the macrophage. The point is in this point انا مش حابب احكي عن تفاصيلها لانه بالباثولوجي اعتقد بيحكوها. ال LDL molecules مرتبطين دائما بالاثيروسكليروسيس because they are under the oxidative stress going to be radical themselves, and that's why the white blood cells are starting to eat them at that site. So as a kind of activation of the process or trigger of the process, the oxidized LDL is the problem rather than the LDL itself, because it will activate the white blood cells to have or to form what's called form cells. We have also a condition that's known as shock-related injury, skin diseases, carcinogenesis, and sometimes treatment of it's called interaction with the treatment of the cancer treatment. Aging itself is also with the ROS species concentration or effect, if you would. These are examples of what's going to happen, for example, to the DNA molecule if we have oxidative stress. This structure is modified guanine, which is the normal one. It will be converted to what's called 8-oxoguanine because of the effect of the ROS species. I'm good with this one. It's enough to know the effect of these reactive oxygen species on the nitrogen bases that are part of the DNA or RNA structure. I picked a paper long time ago, صارت مكررة كثير يمكن نحكي عنها، اللي هو هذا البيبر بتجاوب على هذا السؤال. What will happen during pregnancy and birth if we have higher activity of antioxidant enzymes in the preterm babies and that are facing the ROS stress. ملخص التايتل اللي حكيته قبل شوي كالآتي، انه في عندنا على سبيل المثال certain ages of babies or neonates or infants, if you would, or fetus. This is the gestational time, and they are just monitoring the formation of the glutathione, اللي هو reduced one, and the oxidized one, as well as the partial pressure of the oxygen. And finally, we have the most important thing, اللي هو the concentration of the reduced glutathione over the oxidized glutathione. What is the meaning of such table? الفكرة الأساسية اللي كنت ليش أنا بحط هذا التيبل دائما إنه how we read the clinical data and how we can do a research by just extracting these data. If you take, for example, these two groups, هاي عبارة عن تيست بالنسبة للبارامترز اللي معهم وهي البي فاليو بالنسبة للديفرنسز. So they just الجروب الاول كان عمرهم من 23 ل 33 اسبوع، الجروب الثاني كان عمرهم من 34 ل 42 اسبوع. And they monitor all of these parameters. For example, اذا كان البارشال بريشر في المجموعه الاولى واصل الى هذا الحد بالمقارنه مع البارشال بريشر للجروب الثانيه. So there's no difference. However, here we have arterial pressure in these individuals is somehow significantly different. What's the effect of the oxygen pressure or the concentration of the oxygen in these two groups? So eventually what they notice is the following. There is a high significant or high difference in the ratio of glutathione or reduced glutathione to the glutathione itself between the first group and the second group, which means that we have high oxidative stress at this period of time due to the increase of the amount of oxygen that is infused to those babies or those infants. So always we have, as well as we have significant difference between the glutathione concentration, اللي هو absolute number between the first group and the second group. But the most important thing is this one, اللي هو the ratio of the reduced one over the oxidized one. اللي بدي اياه من هذا السلايد تفهموا كمان انه we are not measuring the free radicals themselves عشان اعرف انه في عندي reactive oxidation. The glutathione itself. What is the situation of the glutathione in these two groups? Again and again, the most affected molecules اللي هم DNA والبروتينز. أنا أعتقد إني شاطح كثير في هذول المواضيع لدرجة إني عيدهم أكثر من مرة. Okay. So this is the lipids. Just forget it. مش كثير important إنه نعرف sequential reaction الليبيدز كيف بيكونوا free radicals. Okay. هلا للامانه من اصعب المواضيع اللي ينحكى فيها او تندرس اللي هو الرياكتيف اوكسجين سبيشيز، لانه لما بتحكي عنهم بس خلينا نرجع شوي. And you go to the literature, this is what you see. A lot of papers talking about, for example, aging or atherosclerosis or multiple sclerosis, a lot of diseases that are linking these ROS species with these diseases. So there is no clear answer. However, they are there. They have their effect, and they are trying to explain the effect by saying, you know, these oxygen species can convert our organic molecules, which is a fact, by the way, to abnormal structure. Okay. Thank you.